Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Shark Talk with surfer, shark attack survivor, shark photographer and advocate Mike Coots. We're going to be talking about the attack itself, about Mike's incredible photography work and about his approach to shark conservation. And of course, as always, we will be having your questions answered too. So enjoy. Mike, welcome to Shark Talk. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with me.
Thanks for having me, Jenna. Aloha.
Aloha. In fact,
Aloha.
On that note, I'm sat here in England, 8 p.m. Tell us where you are and give us an idea of the vibe where you are.
I'm in a little old sugar plantation town called Kilauea. I'm on the island of Kauai in the state of Hawaii in the U.S. Little tiny rock surrounded by a lot of water.
And you've got your coffee, hopefully, because you're joining us at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, 9 o'clock in the morning, yep. Looks like it's a beautiful day outside. It's probably about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. With my guess is throughout this talk, if we chat for half an hour or so, it'll rain a couple times and then get sunny again. That's just typical Hawaii weather.
And I'm sure you'll be heading out for a surf at some point, will you?
Yeah, probably right after this.
Good on you. Good on you. Don't blame you at all. Right, well, we're gonna get started. And I think it makes sense to, first of all, talk about the shark attack. I think you must have talked about this and told this story so many times, but it plays such a pivotal role in your journey into shark advocacy that it makes sense. So could you just tell us what happened?
Yeah, well, I'll rewind a little bit prior to the shark attack. I grew up on this island. I was an avid ocean lover. I love bodyboarding or boogie boarding. Did it almost every day. I was on a boogie boarding team. We had a coach, and I really wanted to be a professional bodyboarder. I graduated high school. This was in 1997, and we had a really lousy summer. The waves weren't good at all. There was periods where we didn't even get in the water for days and days, and I felt like my gills were drying out. And it came late October, and that's when our winter surf season starts. And we had this swell that was looking really promising. You can see it about a week out or so in the forecast, and we got all really excited. And we planned a big day at the beach. And this was October 28th, 1997. And woke up early, and I went down to the beach with my surfing team. My coach, Bob, was there, and we take this old vehicle. It's called a Scout. To get to the beach, you've got to go on kind of a 4x4 sandy. Starts like on a dirt road, then goes to sand, and you drive on the sand, and you pull right up to the surf spot. And that's what we did. We pulled like literally right up to the water, and my eyes were just, I couldn't believe it. The waves are going off. The best waves I had seen in months. And we were all so excited. And we opened the car doors. And I remember just like very vividly those doors opening and getting the stinkiest smell, like this foul, fishy, rancid, gross, like if your fridge turned off for a year and you opened it and you had a bunch of stinky stuff inside, like worse than that. It was disgusting. But the waves were going off, and I should have probably used it as maybe a cue that something was not right. But because, like I mentioned, the waves were going off, there wasn't anything stopping us. And we all got in the water, and this would have been about 7:30 in the morning, paddled out, and the surf spot, it's a reef break that goes in the sand, and it was in about 30 feet of water. And we were 100 yards or so offshore, and my friends right off the bat all caught really good rides. Waves breaking sets, and this was a really good set, and I think there was like 8 waves in that set or so, and they all got like some really good rides. And this last wave was coming, and there was nobody out the back left except for a guy who had never surfed it before. And he looked at me, and I looked at him like, who's going to go on this wave? Because we don't want to share waves, and it's usually like whoever starts paddling first, that's their wave. So I remember like trying to signal my dominance. I want this wave, and my fingertips brushed the surface as I was paddling, and a large tiger shark came up from underneath me, grabbed onto me. I didn't see the fin coming from far away. I didn't see any splashing or any noise or anything at all. It was a total ambush attack. I was definitely blindsided by it, and it locked me in its mouth. I had both my legs in its mouth. I felt immense pressure, like maybe 10 guys were sitting on my legs. I didn't feel any pain at all. And I just remember kind of getting a real creepy feeling coming over me. I tried getting my legs out of its mouth. That didn't work, and I felt the pressure getting tighter and tighter. And I took my left hand and I punched it a couple times in the nose, and it let go. And I remember looking at it like it was right in my chest. It was really wide, and the nose was really square. So it was definitely a tiger shark. And I got back on my board. I looked at my index finger, and it was split open. I could pretty much see the bone, and there was blood. And everything everywhere, and looked like a split open potato, like just completely split open. And I knew I was hurt. I looked at the surfer next to me. He was completely white, white as a ghost. His eyes were like sticking out of his head. I didn't know what to say. I just yelled, "Shark, go in!" And he started paddling into the beach. I paddled behind him, and as I'm paddling, when you're paddling in a prone position, so you don't see what's behind you, you're just kind of looking at the beach paddling. And my right leg started doing this like shake, like a spasm, and I thought in the back of my mind, nope, that's the shark finishing me off. I
Wow.
looked over my shoulder as I'm paddling, and it wasn't that. It was my leg severed off perfectly. Like you could have taken a machete or a scalpel and right off, and blood was shooting out the middle of my limb that was severed off. Like every time my heart beat, like these huge squirts. Um,
Wow.
and I was like, "Well, this isn't good." And like fortunately, right then a wave came, a little tiny waist high wave. I rode it right up to the sand. My friends on my surfing team saw what was happening. They ran to my aid. My friend Kyle was really quick thinking. Dragged me up a little higher on the beach, took my leash, and made a tourniquet right, kind of right above my knee, to stop the bleeding. Which later the doctor said saved my life. They kind of said a prayer for me right there on the beach, and I remember not being too scared of dying. I kind of thought I was going to die, but it was kind of just this real calm feeling. And opened my eyes, and there was a pickup truck right there. They threw me in the bed of the truck. We off road on the sand onto the dirt road, and going as fast as we could to the emergency room. And I was laying in the back of that pickup truck by myself, going in and out of shock. I remember getting hot and cold, hot and cold. Didn't want to look at my injury at all. There was a surfboard bag in the back of the truck, and I just kind of played with the fabric of that bag, keeping my mind off, I guess, my injury. And we pulled right up to the emergency room, and I remember the ER doors opening up, and some nurses and doctors ran right up to me, and the doctor put his arm on my shoulder, and I passed out. I think I was just holding on for like medical help, and I kind of woke up um, in a sort of like a kind of a weird dreamlike state in our small little hospital called KVMH. I explained to them I got attacked by a shark, how big it was. They said, you're going to be okay, and I kind of passed out again and woke up a day later in our main hospital, Wilcox. My family around me, and I remember my mom telling me that I'd lost my leg, and I said I know I saw it come off, and they were just really happy I was alive. And spent about a week or so in the hospital. About a month after that, bedridden. That was the hardest period of my life, just because not as much losing my leg, it was just being out of the water. It was the start of our really good surf season. Everybody was surfing amazing waves, and I was watching TV all day, and that was a little hard for me.
Mm.
And then once the doctor said the stitches and steeples come out, the risk of infection was gone. I was able to get back in the water, and it was about a month or so after the attack. And it just so happened to be that my first time back in the water was really close to where I got attacked, just because the waves were good that day there. And ever since then, I've pretty much loved going back in the water.
What a story. Let's go back to the moment when you opened the doors, the van doors, and were hit by that
Yeah.
smell.
Yep.
Did you ever find out what that was?
We have a shrimp farm, and they were doing an environmental impact statement during that time, and I think they were testing the discharge of the shrimp farm. So there could have been some shrimp waste. It also there's a ditch system really close to where I was surfing, and that morning they opened it up. Or that's what I heard. And there could have been a lot of tilapia that hit the ocean and died. Um, because of the salinity, and the shark might have been in the area because of that. But I do feel strongly that there was a correlation between that smell and my attack.
Mm. And it is important to highlight that, isn't it? Because it's something that we all, as shark advocates, want people to take into consideration, that you have to read your environment. You have to, if you're seeing a shark and you're interacting with the shark, try and read their behaviour, or if you're going into their habitat, just
Yep.
be aware. So that's very interesting that there was a potential
Yeah.
warning sign.
Yeah. And since then, I've just through my uneducated scientific analysis, I've kind of seen a pattern of like one thing is we have we call Sharktober, and there's a lot of attacks in late October, early November, and then also a lot of these attacks they're happening in areas like tiger sharks are ambush predators, and they're happening where the underwater topography changes, where you're not going to really have a shark attack in the middle of a long white sandy beach. It's going to be where the sand hits the reef. It's going to be where a drop off happens, a channel happens. There's some sort of geographical change underwater that's really abrupt and sudden. And if you're in that area and a shark's in that area, it might feel more comfortable attacking because it likes that ambush style. And then the third thing would be those cute, like when there's fishing boats in and there's a lot of chum in the water or bait, or guys are bottom fish, like there's just like other variables, and you're surfing next to that the sharks might be coming in because of that, but then you're in the area and they might see you like an opportunity for a human and shark interaction. So it's kind of those three things. And I just there's kind of almost always seems to when there's an attack, it's one of those factors is in play.
Interesting, interesting. At what point did your recovery become about advocating for sharks? At what point did it hit you that you thought, right, I'm gonna turn this into a positive and do something and give something back to the sharks? Because that's amazing that you took that outlook.
Yeah, that'd be one word, and that's shark water. Documentary by Rob Stewart. I watched it on YouTube. Um, Blew me away. It was life changing. It really resonated, hit it home, and halfway through the film, there was a number on the screen: 70 million sharks a year killed for their fins, and to me, that just seemed completely wrong. And I just really felt compelled in my unique situation to do something. But it was that film that changed my life and made me sort of change the course of my life.
And tell us about the first time that you came face to face with the shark after your
Uh,
attack, obviously.
yeah. Well, the first time was it was a kind of a random, hot, no wave summer day, and this was 3 or 4 years after the shark attack. And my friend had a dead pig. There's a lot of pigs around here, and we took it out on my jet ski and we just threw it overboard. And I'd had my coffee, and it was in the morning time. And about an hour later, a big tiger shark came up, and we just watched it eat the pig, basically the entire thing in like 30 seconds, and just swim away. And I just remember it was a really big shark. We were on a small jet ski, and not being scared. It was just really cool, though. It was a lot different than what I experienced getting attacked, I guess. Years after that, I got invited to go to Guadalupe, Mexico. And we pulled up to the island after about 24 hours of heading out to sea. And I remember like being in my bunk and the chain of the anchor dropping. And I was like, oh, I guess it's time to get up, and got up. Everybody else was still asleep. I went to the back of the boat, and had the shark cages in the water. And one of the deckhands was like, you can jump in if you want. And it was just me by myself. And I got in the water, and within 3 seconds, I turned around, and there was a huge great white looking face to face at me, like a foot away. I had no idea that it was just going to be that fast and right in my face. And that was really cool. I swam up, and I put my head above the cage, and I yelled at the guys, "There's a huge shark!" And they were just laughing, and they're like, "That's why you're here." And that was a really cool moment. And that was my first moment with a big shark right in my face.
And the
Yeah.
beauty of your photography work is that you're giving people the opportunity to almost imagine what that feels like. I mean, some of your photos are exactly that. A huge great white shark looking straight down your lens, and you feel like you're there with the shark. It's amazing. Just quickly, I'll advise everyone watching, I'm sure you've probably all seen Mike Coots' photographs, but do go onto his Instagram, because there are some stunning images on there, just in their own right, but also they do amazing things for the sharks, because they do bring out a different side, a personality almost.
I maybe attribute a little of that to back to shooting surfing. When I was shooting surfing, everybody was shooting with a 15 millimeter lens, a fisheye lens in the water. And because I was with a prosthetic, it was a little bit more difficult for me to swim in the bigger waves and be that close to the action, because it wouldn't be the wave that I'm shooting. Because with a 15, you've got to be really close to the surfer and really in the surf zone. It wasn't necessarily that wave. It was when I popped up the next wave, I couldn't get out fast enough with the prosthetic sort of dragging behind. So I started using longer focal lengths to pull myself a little bit away from the action, but I could safely still get good shots and feel real intimate, like you're really in that moment. And I started finding that the images were just as good or better as the fisheye shots. And it really brought out, like, you shoot a person surfing with a portraiture lens, like a longer focal length, like a 50, 80, the 70 to 200, the 85. It looked really cool, and you could pull in backgrounds, and it just had this different look. And after my first couple shark dives, I started noticing, okay, well, all these locations that have the best shark diving in the world, the majority of them have incredibly clear water. Whether it's Guadalupe or the Bahamas, just the water visibility is unbelievable. And a lot of people shoot fisheye or really wide angle lenses underwater is because you need to be really close to your subject. If you got all that atmosphere underwater, that all those particles underwater, and your subject's further away, you're not going to have the contrast, the sharpness, and things like that. So you want to be close to your subject. And if you've got a bigger subject like a turtle, a seal, or a bigger fish, to get it in the frame, you're going to need a fisheye. So if you were to Google underwater photography, I would say 9 out of 10 images are shot with a fisheye or a really wide angle lens. But because I was in such clear water, I was like, well, maybe I could be a little further away to some of these sharks, or they could be even close to me, but I could shoot them with a longer focal length. And I started doing that, and I notice that the images, it does a lot of justice. Like just like shooting people, I wouldn't shoot you with a GoPro necessarily for like a nice portrait look. I'd be further away and I'd use a longer lens. And it what it does is it with a fisheye, you really your ears look bigger, your nose, everything proportionately looks kind of off and looks funny. Whereas with the longer focal lengths, you've got that compression and everything looks more natural. And for sharks, you give it that depth and that volume and everything that a shark is. You're able to really, I guess, portray that true story better. And ever since then, I've fallen in love, I guess, just using different lenses underwater. I think if you want to get new stories being told and new angles and just share new visuals, it's to do something that other people aren't doing. And I'm a firm believer of that.
Mm. When you go out to do a shoot, do you have an idea of the sort of image you want to get, or do you head out there and see what comes your way, or how do you plan?
That's a good question. It depends what species and the conditions and what's going on. That's the biggest key, and who I'm with for safety and things like that. But there is definitely, I have in the back of my mind a lot of shots, and there's a lot of shots that I haven't got yet that I'm trying to logistically think of how to pull it off. Um, a lot of stuff I'd like to shoot a lot more sunsets with sharks and low light and beautiful light. But I definitely sort of have a vision when I go out there. But it's maybe 50% that, but it's also 50% when I'm back at home in Lightroom on the computer and I'm looking for little moments and little things and little nuances and a little maybe feeder fish in the shark's mouth, something like that when I'm going through my imagery. It's to really share something different and share sort of what sharks do every day, all day. They're not eating all day, but they are looking gorgeous all day.
I went through your Instagram and tried to pick a few of my favourite images, which is an impossible task. And what I'd like to know, I mean, if you want to tell us a little bit about how you got the pictures, you can, but also the story, just the story behind the image, because you never get to know that. You see all these pictures and you think, I wonder what was happening that day or what the backstory is. So, first one, which goes back to what we were talking about when you went face to face with the great white in Guadalupe.
Very cool. Yeah. So those are bait fish, and what it is those bait fish actually come to attack the bait before the shark. So they're it's almost like this rhythmic dance, and they'll flush themselves to the bait. And that's basically what I'm capturing is them kind of all coming through and a big shark coming across. And that would have been shot probably with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. You can see the compression and how everything's really flat, and that shark looks fat. If you were to do that with a fisheye lens, you would get a lot more blue ocean and the fishes would be a lot smaller and you wouldn't get that scale and that intimacy between the two different subjects, the little fish and the big fish. And that was shot with an Aquatech water housing, Canon 5D Mark IV, and that was in Mexico.
The next picture, I think everybody's seen. It's an amazing image, and also the caption that often goes with it is brilliant as well. So it's this one. With the stepping on Lego caption. First of all, what is the backstory with this image?
So I used to live in New Zealand. I spent 2 years of high school there. I absolutely in love with New Zealand, and I have a really close friend, Wayne, who lives in Mount Maunganui in New Zealand, and he was getting married and wanted me to be a groomsman in his wedding. And I was dating a girl at this time, and I was like, let's go to New Zealand, go to this wedding. And it was before Christmas, and I surprised her with a great white shark diving day. And it was just their day trips. And they leave out of this little town called Bluff. So we went to New Zealand, and before the wedding, we headed down very south. And I had this idea of kind of getting some surface stuff, but not being in the water. And the water was really cold, and maybe it was the water temperature just kind of I don't know. It's a lot easier sometimes to just have a coffee in your hand and be dry on the boat and get cool shark photos, because you can get shark photos pretty much underwater, above water, like there's just so many opportunities to get cool stuff. You don't necessarily have to always be in the water. The day before we went to before the shark dive, we went to the hardware store and I found the biggest wooden dowel I could find, a long wooden stick. I think the thing was like 6 feet long, and I attached some bicycle. It's like the GoPro bicycle mount on it. It's like it's like a big boom. And I remember the next morning, the sun was coming up, and we're boarding the boat, and the boat captain, this guy Mike Haynes, sort of this old school, just seen it all, rough and tough boat guy. He just looks at me as like this, just this like awkward white guy with one leg, and he's got this long wooden stick. And what is he bringing on my boat for? And I totally got that vibe. And I'm a firm believer that sometimes you just got to be the weird person and do things that are just different to get good unique imagery. And what I did was I basically just hung it kind of right above the water surface halfway through the day, and I put it on the half-second timer mode on GoPro. It was one of the older GoPros, and it shoots a photo, 2 photos a second, and you just kind of just push the button and let it do its thing. And the shark came up and it kind of just breached the water and looked around and did a weird little spy hopping deal, and then went back underwater. And I was like, "Ooh, that's pretty cool." And we left the next day to the wedding, and I was going through my images, and I was like, "Wow, this looks a lot different than any shark photo I've really seen."
And with this image, the water is completely still. So is there no bait, or was it just a
Yeah,
random spy hop?
there was bait in the water, but the bait was on the opposite side. This was just a total random maneuver by the shark. And you when you go down there, you'll notice the sharks are different. They just act different, and there's a lot of you'll see a piece of seaweed floating by, and a shark will kind of pretty much breach out of the water just playing with the seaweed. It's pretty cool to see. It's real primitive, and it's sort of like Guadalupe, where you're anchored in the lee, and that's why the water's really calm. But it's freezing cold. I've seen a white shark try to eat an albatross. That was pretty cool.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so you just kind of always got to be prepared, and it's not just you're like a lot of other places. If there's bait in the water, you're really all eyes are on the bait because that's where the action is. In New Zealand, that's the furthest from the truth. Stuff just happens all around.
Right, the next picture is this one. It's an amazing image, considering your story, and your
Yep, yep.
relationship with tiger sharks. So I'd love to know a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
so that was my first time diving ever with a tiger shark. That was my first day underwater with the
No.
tiger sharks. Yeah,
Okay.
and that was it off of Grand Bahama. That was Tiger Beach. I was with a really amazing crew, and I just remember being blown away. My first hour or so around tigers of how different they are than I thought they were. Really more timid. Everything was slow motion. Everything just it feels really slowed down, and they're really calculated and really cautious. And I was shooting with a 15 millimeter. I know I don't say don't shoot with a 15, but this morning I had a 15, and tiger shark kind of swam by me, and I just put my hand out there. And there's even some images where I'm like touching it and things like that. And I've gotten a bit of flack on social media because you're not supposed to touch sharks. It's just really ethically not the best thing to do. And for me, it felt really right. It felt like a full circle and a connection.
Mm.
And that was a pretty special moment for me.
Wow, that is an amazing image. Then that has a lot of emotion for you, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The next and final image I want to talk to you about is again a tiger shark, and it's I've only dived with a tiger shark twice, and they
Okay.
have never come too close. But the one thing that I've always remembered is that eye. Just seeing this
Hmm.
massive eye swiveling, and I'll never forget it. You've got some really amazing images focusing on the eyes, not just of tiger
Yep.
sharks, great whites as well. Tell us a little bit about your ethos as to why you like to focus in on the eyes.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've got a really well known artist here in Hawaii. His name is Wyland. He does huge murals. A lot of them are with whales and undersea life. Incredible work. And I was watching a documentary on his work, and sort of the process that he goes through creating this art. And he says everything happens in the eyes. The life of the animal, the life of the person, the life of whatever it is, it's in the eyes. I guess if you look at a dead person, you know they're dead by the look in their eyes. Like that's where the life is. And he says he spends the majority of his time, maybe I think it was like 90 something percent on the eyes. I found that really fascinating, and ever since then, I've sort of tried to put my energy and the eyes, and then that's I guess one of that first day white shark diving in Guadalupe. I think the biggest takeaway for me was looking at great white sharks' eyes. They're a
Mm.
lot different than what Hollywood portrays them as. But you won't find a scary shark movie where the eyes are beautiful blue, like they are underwater. When you look in their eyes, you see life and intelligence and a thought process, and not just mindless reactions and a soulless, demon. You see a lot of life in it. And,
I'm going to move on to ask some questions that other people have sent in for you. There was a
okay.
lot, so I've narrowed them down. So the first question is from Adele Danvers. What helped you to overcome the trauma of being attacked, and what good things have come out of the experience?
Um, the trauma itself wasn't too difficult. I won't lie, there was times that were hard. Just having a prosthetic leg and getting used to walking around with basically like a fake limb. And go to school and go to classes, and sometimes it'd be blisters and things like that. So that was like for me, that was the hardest part, was just the actual physical adjustment to using a prosthetic. Mentally, I've been very fortunate that I haven't had any flashbacks or bad dreams or any. There's been no psychological trauma, at least that I don't see. And in a weird way, if it was the best thing that ever happened to me. If you were to ask me if I'd paddle back out that morning knowing I'd become an amputee right then and there, absolutely. It's brought me to meet incredible people. I've been fortunate to go to incredible places, it's given me a real purpose in my life, and I wouldn't change it for anything.
Shark Girl Cape Town, how did your perception of life change after you survived the attack? It's quite a question.
Definitely felt like I'm living on borrowed time. And maybe as I get further and further away from that shark attack date, and I get older, maybe that becomes less. But the few years after that attack, I really felt like I was living on borrowed time, and to just enjoy every moment and every hug and everything, and every sunset, um, and it's, I wish I still had that, because as you get older, then you start getting a little bit more jaded and this and that. But it was really, I felt like I was, and I am living on borrowed time, because um, I guess the amount of blood that I lost that day, the amount of liters, the doctor said I shouldn't be here. That it's actually a medical miracle that I survived, and I I guess I just take that responsibility that I am here for a reason, and to do something with it.
Make it count. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question, Tom Conway Gordon. Which is the most memorable or characterful great white shark that you've seen, and which is your personal favourite photograph that you've taken of a great white shark?
Ooh, that's a good question. Does it have to be a great white?
Well, he has said that in the question.
Of all shark, there's a great hammer in the Bahamas, Celia, or she has a couple other different names. There's nothing like her. She, from all the sharks, she's, to me, has the most character. It's this great hammer. Um, you gotta, and you've probably seen a lot of photos of her. She's pretty popular, and she loves the camera, and she's a total camera hog, and she's always coming up with a big smile. But she, to me, is the most, has the most amount of character of any shark that I've ever dove with. For a great white, shoots, I just, there's something about the sharks in New Zealand. Like, I love Guadalupe, and for photography, it's the best place in the world to be underwater with sharks, like hands down. At least what I've visited. But the sharks in New Zealand, they're a little bit, they're almost like the people there. They're just like this wild, sort of rugged, could care less if a tropical storm is going to hit the next day kind of people. And their character underwater and on the surface really replicates that.
Just the last thing, I guess, is, do you have an ethos or something that you live by, related to sharks or otherwise, that sort of motivates you each day or when you're heading out into the ocean?
We talk pidgin in Hawaii. It's like kind of a dialect of just this sort of rough and tumble sort of wording. And there's a saying: if can, if no can, still can. It sort of means that if you think you can, sure, you can do it. If you don't think you can, there's a very good chance you can still do it. And I think that holds true. And I'd mentioned before too, like, luck favors the prepared. I think it's just all these little things, like, moments are going to happen and opportunities are going to happen. And if you put that energy out there and you want to do something, the universe is almost going to conspire to work in your favor. It's the weirdest thing. And as I get older, it holds more and more true, is to just find something you want to do, find something you want to overcome, find a challenge, find a goal, and put your mind to it. And maybe it's not going to directly relate to that goal or that challenge or that opportunity, but stuff amazing is going to be thrown your way. And without fail, I promise you that'll happen.
Just finally, how can people out there see your work and follow along with all of your adventures?
It'd be my Instagram, my name, Mike Coots. Yeah, that's probably the best way.
That's the best place. Okay, good to know.
Thank you for sharing that.
No, not at all. Thank you to everyone for watching, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, Mike. So thank you, and all the best with your next adventure, whenever and wherever that may be.
Thank you, Gemma, and much aloha. Cheers.